of April. There you go.
Yeah.
So
Well,
it was it
my
was
my
Dan's
re-
New Year's
my New Year's.
resolution to be early. Yeah. So as I said,
Yes, my
um,
my New Year's resolution was to be more punctual, but I was late starting it.
well, there you go. There you go. All right. So one story we didn't get to yesterday was about U.S. tariffs. Tariff refunds begin based upon the ruling by the U.S. Court of International Trade that basically said that these tariffs were illegal and therefore they had to be refunded. However, there's about 330,000 importers that will get some, at least some money back. However, consumers likely won't.
Yes. No, they will not. And and I should point out, well, this is the rub. Now, certain companies like most of the initiative, or the big part of the initiative to get the tariffs removed, was from small businesses. They were
Yeah,
taking a beating. And remember,
right.
small business is just
Absolutely.
not your little pizza store on the corner. It is businesses up to several $1 million that may have 50 or 60 employees are
Yeah,
considered small businesses.
yeah,
So it is, some of these are pretty big operations, and small businesses employ most of the people in the United States, and I think also in Canada. So that's why they are very important. They're quite often, small businesses are also the entry level jobs that people have.
yeah,
Um, but what's happening in places, big places, but Costco got in on it, and other marketers got in on this too. Walmart, I believe, as well. Now, what are they going to do with their refund? What's
yeah,
Costco going to do with their refund? Well,
yeah.
they're a big operation. How are they going to make it right with the people who the uh, paid the inflated prices that
And
Donald and his buddies put on everyone?
yeah, and the likelihood is the Ma and Pup organization that actually gets a tariff refund is likely to give it back to their customers, aren't they?
Well, it's going to be difficult because for the first while they were eating a lot of the costs.
Yeah,
So they were eating a large part of the tariffs and not putting that over to their customers to sort of break them in at a time. A
yeah,
place like Costco was feeding it a little at a time. They may have
yeah,
been hit with a 20% tariff on whatever they brought in from Canada, and they then maybe gave charged them a little extra here, a little extra there. We saw what problem Jeff Bezos had with Amazon when they started to put the tariff price on their price when they were selling something. Let's say they were selling a phone, and then they
yeah,
would put the tariff price on it that you would have to pay. So they put the price, the tax, and the tariff cost. Well, Trump freaked out, as we remember, and
yeah.
he called
Oh
that a
yeah,
political hit, even though Bezos is one of the supporters. So Bezos had to quickly remove that and kind of put it in there and add it somehow without it looking like it's a tariff. How do you give that back to somebody? I suppose if you have the receipt, you could go and say, okay, here it is. Here's where it said tariff. But a lot of the costs don't put that in there.
yeah,
So it's going to be a difficult thing. Now, a company like Costco says the way they're going to sort of make it good with the consumers that come into their stores is to reduce prices, or use that money to reduce the price of commodities in their store until the refund is used up.
yeah.
So that's one way they could give it back.
So
Because
if
of
they
course you have customers coming in steadily for food or whatever else, and you could provide whatever for smaller cost
yeah.
or less
So
cost as the
for
tariff refunds.
example, so what you're basically saying is that, for example, let's say that, and I don't know any of the figures, of course, but let's say that Costco gets $10 million worth of refunds from it. They spread that $10 million out across all their US stores and reduced prices on certain commodities. Let's say they take a dollar off meat product.
Yeah, or something like that, or they could take it off of milk, something that the common things, milk or bread, the things that all people use for staples. Something.
I use the meat because meat has gone up in price quite a lot over the last year or so.
Yeah, it's particularly beef and fish.
Yeah,
beef in particular. I can't believe how much fish costs.
And that's the reason I used the meat idea was, because basically we've seen massive increases in the cost of meats overall, right, and fish as well. Yeah, absolutely, right.
Yeah,
and
so okay, go ahead.
Yeah, and basically because I remember the last time I been in kind of Lococos to get some salmon. Oh my God, the price has gone up by like $10.
Yeah. Now, I would like to point out here that we talk about corruption a lot of times, and the shadow of corruption is continually on the Trump administration and his friends and family making money out of different pronouncements. He make a pronouncement that straits are open, stock markets fly up, right? People sell them. Then he makes a pronouncement that then it's found out that the straits aren't going. That thing back and forth. Well, one thing, when the tariffs came in, Mr. Howard Lutnick, his trade guy, suddenly seemed to know that this tariff was not going to hang in for very long, because he bought up a lot of the tariff refunds from a lot of people. He bought when these small businesses were first hit with these tariffs.
Yeah.
He financed a lot of people and bought their refunds if the refunds happened. So he bought them for 30% of their cost. In other words, if somebody expected to get whatever their refund was, Howard Lutnick bought it for 30% of its real value.
Yeah.
And so basically what they did is we need money now, so we'll guarantee you our tariff or refund.
So if you were expecting a tariff refund of $100,000, let's say, for a small business, he'd give you 30.
Yes,
on the spot.
And he just made the deal with everybody when the tariffs come off. For money now, so you can survive. I'll give you the money, but I get your tariff refund for 30% of what it's worth.
Yeah.
And so he gets $100,000 when the guy when somebody's had to pay get back $100,000 of the tariffs they paid. They don't. Howard Lutnick gets the $100,000 and he gives them 30.
Well, yeah, but the thing is that 30,000 might well be the difference between surviving a year ago and not.
Well, that was the whole point. Small businesses were hurt very bad, very quickly by the tariffs, and Lutnick saw an opportunity. He says he didn't think those tariffs were going to last too long. He's smarter than Dr. Donald J. for Jesus Trump, and so he bought up a lot of the tariff refunds before they were even refunded. And that was really on the early going.
Yeah.
Now you could say, well, it was just gamble on his part. Well,
it was.
He was the guy that touted it, that the tariffs were the greatest thing, and there's no way they could get rid of them. And meanwhile, in the back, he's making these sly deals. The guy's a liar, man. Well, I mean, that's an understatement. But here's the guy that said he met Epstein once and got the willies and never went back because he was such a creep. Meanwhile, he had business deals with him. He took his whole family down there to meet him on Epstein Island.
Yeah.
Oh, hi, Mike. How you doing? illegal tariffs. What a farce! Allowing illegal tariffs to disrupt the world and break us, also almost like it was a plan. Canada are the bad guys for not negotiating. Yeah, really.
Yeah.
And Lutnick doesn't even know who he's negotiating with. He thinks it's Christian Freeland.
Yeah.
He had to be corrected by the interviewer just a few days ago.
Yeah. Every Friday, Trump lies and the markets react. Yeah.
Yeah, like his friends are making money hand over fist. Say this today, and we'll buy this, and we say this today, and we'll buy that.
Yeah.
And he has assured anyone who has bought stock in the military industrial complex will be wealthy for many years to come because they are exhausting their supplies of missiles, and they're going to have to rebuild all those. And that assures the defense companies money for many, many years to come. Big, huge profits.
Yeah. All right. Well, actually, I would think for the smallest companies, the biggest challenge with getting these tariffs is how you prove that you paid a tariff.
Well, the big companies are easily they've paid the tariff, but the person, the individual, that's super difficult to do unless it's listing.
Yeah.
And remember, like I said, Bezos was listing the tariff on the things that they were selling over Amazon, and Trump freaked out. Now, if he was allowed to keep that going, then the customer can say, "Yes, this is the tariff I paid." You know, when I bought 12 pairs of underwear, this is the tariff I paid because it was on the receipt. But Trump freaked out when he started putting that on the receipt, and he had to take it off.
Yeah, but
he said it was a political hit.
Yeah, the issue, of course, about paying a tariff refund on your 12 pairs of underwear is that it costs more than $27, which is your refund, to actually process that refund.
I don't know.
You know what I mean?
Yeah, but still, it's pretty hard. So what they're saying is what Costco and probably some of the other stores will do is try to make it look or convince their customers they're going to give them, reduce the cost of some things by using the tariff refunds to do that, so that the consumer now can buy things for less than they normally would, where before they were buying things for a little more than they normally would.
Yeah. I don't doubt that companies like Costco will do that. I somehow don't think that Walmart will do that, but then I'm very cynical about Walmart.
I'm not so sure how they're going to fix this, but it was a disaster.
Yeah.
Not even a Republican stacked Supreme Court could go along with Trump's dumb ideas on this one. Yeah. And but anyway, what else we got?
Yeah, okay. So before we move off the US, NASA is coordinating a search for missing scientists. And Trump has vowed in the next week and a half to have the White House work with the FBI to identify potential patterns. Now, I didn't know, how come there's so many missing scientists? That's a good question.
That is a very good question. And I looked it up. There are between 11 and 12,000 scientists that are as important as these scientists working in high security defense or national security roles. The specific concentration of disappearances in these fields has raised concern among lawmakers. The odds of this happening are very extraordinary. Yeah. Imagine going into a casino. And you start winning huge. And the casino people come out and they say, well, you must be cheating. And you say, no, I'm not cheating. You must be cheating because the odds of you winning that much are 1 in a billion. Yeah. Well, this is the odds of these scientists, either dying, being murdered, or disappearing is extraordinary. And because they're all high-end figures, it's very, very suspicious. And so the FBI and a bunch of agencies, the FBI, NASA, and defense industries and stuff, are all going to try to coordinate and try to figure out what's gone on.
Yeah.
And I'll give you a rundown of. I got it here in both places. There's Michael David Hick. Well, I'll use this one, and I'll tell you who's gone. Michael David Hicks and Frank Mywald, NASA-linked researchers whose causes of deaths are unknown. Carl Grillmar and Nuno Loreo, researchers who were shot and killed. One of them right outside their house.
Yeah.
And for no, Monica Jacinto Reza, a JPL expert who went missing after a 2025 search. Amy Eskridge, a researcher whose 2022 death is part of the 11 reported as a suicide. There are others. The body of Jason Thomas was found in a lake 3 minutes after he went missing. Erskridge was self-inflicted gun wounds, and they're not even sure of that. There was also a retired Air Force Major General William McCasland, who is 68, who is being asked about the disappearances of some of these scientists earlier, and then he disappeared. He went missing. They have five of them went missing. What are the odds of 5 people in a high-end scientific among the 11 and 12,000 people that work in these fields go missing?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Very little. Very little. Yeah, it seems a lot. It seems quite a lot of people to just suddenly go missing, and deaths of young, otherwise.
These are not young.
Well, no, some of the people who were killed were not exactly old.
These are ages from 34 to 79, actually. Yeah. In that range.
Yeah. And whilst one could accept a person who's 79 dying unusually, and maybe even arguably a guy who's 59 or 61, when it comes to somebody who's 34, that certainly raises questions, right?
Well, it's suspicious circumstances that these ones are. There are, I think, a few of them actually. Most were involved in nuclear science and space research, and some were in the UAP research, was the unidentified anomalous phenomena, which used to be the UFO. That's what they call it now, UAP, unidentified anomalous phenomena. Some of them are involved in that, and they disappeared. So what is going on? This is very interesting. I found this will also provide. This is a welcome diversion for the Trump regime right now. Trump has found out about this, and he's asked to have this focused on and some sort of answers by a week and a half from now. Well, that gives him a divergence from the sort of so far unsuccessful war in Iran, the war that will have seems to have no end to it as yet anyway. So this gives him a welcome divergence from this. And we thought the war was a welcome divergence for him from the Epstein file, which it kind of has been. It has been a divergence from the Epstein file, but that hasn't gone away. It's coming back.
Yeah, that is not going to go away. Yeah. And the point being is that, these are, some sound very sinister in the way you described them earlier on. That just sounded sinister anyway. You know what I mean?
Yes, especially the ones that disappeared. That's very odd. A couple of them were murdered. One of them was a self-inflicted gun wound, which there's questions about that too. Mm-hmm. There's a bunch of different aspects of this that just doesn't add up. Now, it could all be very coincidental. none of the deaths seems to be connected to the other one. In other words, two people working on the same thing or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
So, but nobody
And
knows.
it's not like
the people that disappeared left everything behind, left their wallets, their phones, their everything. Some people go for a walk, went for a jog or something, and never found again.
Yeah. You know, so they went out. They went out for a run at lunchtime and never came back.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's very, very, very interesting. And Mike is saying, with all these security councils and government agencies like the FBI, how does this go unnoticed? Yeah, well, it hasn't gone unnoticed because that major general that I said went missing, he was being asked about that. There were, I don't know if it was the FBI or who it was starting to make some pretty strong investigations, and this fellow will not respond to them. That was the William McClashen, who was a major general, and he was the guy they went to see what's going on here. And he disappeared.
And
after he was uncooperative.
Yeah. And the interesting thing is that thank you for where you sent this from, by the way, Fox News.
Right? Yes. Yep.
And you know, it is taken seriously by Fox News. This is actually a hardcore piece of news by Fox News, which is unusual in the modern
there are it is provided. Sometimes they can be. They don't need to add anything to this. They don't have to add that Trump is a hero on this one, or Trump solved the world's problems, or the peace president started a war to make more peace. You know, that kind of thing. They are pathetic, though. Oh God, are they ever pathetic? When they try to when they're apologists for Trump and Ludnick and all those, holy cow, are they terrible, right? It's just like they're making stuff up on the spot, you know.
But one of these pictures.
Trump is an axe murderer, but he could have killed a lot more people. And we have to admit that Donald Trump, yes, he does go offhand and chop people up. But remember, he had an opportunity of killing 20 people, and he only killed 5. Right? The man is merciful.
I was going to say one of the pictures of these people, and I get that the pictures might not necessarily match how they are now, but one of these pictures looks at least 20 years old.
Yeah, the ages range. There's 30, 34, 45, 61, 59, 47, 53, 60, 79, and 48. So
what I meant is that the picture was taken 20 years ago. It was a badly, it was a bad picture done pre-digital image era.
Yeah, like typical. The real estate agents like to do that. They like to take a picture that was like 20, 30 years ago. I remember a neighbor of mine was a real estate agent. She was a real estate agent. Yeah. And she had a picture on her card that was like 25 years previous. Hey, this doesn't look anything like you. Oh, yeah, okay. Well, what's this? Your high school photograph?
Yeah.
Especially women.
Yeah. Well, no, this is a young man, but still. Anyway, okay. Right. Well, I hope we can find some answers on that one. All right. Moving. If it was not for the great leadership of your Mr. President, holy crap. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We'll leave it at that. Okay. So moving on.
Well, I would just conclude that they are investigating what they used to call UFOs, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. And I am asking the unidentified anomalous phenomenon to kind of take away someone, take them to space, do a bit of study on them. You know who I mean.
Oh, you meaning the CIA or the KGB or?
No, I'm talking about aliens, unidentified anomalous phenomenon. Come and get them. Get them out of here.
I know. I was just answering in earthly tones.
Mhm.
All right, one more. CBC has new reporting office in St. Catherine. Has a new reporting office in St. Catharines. Okay,
Oh, good.
didn't know that. Okay, thank you for
They'll
that.
be calling us for tips anytime, I'm sure.
I'm sure they will. Right. Okay. Carney gets a mixed response about after describing that Canada's long-standing economic dependence upon the United States was a weakness and a weakness that must be corrected. All right, so he's been facing criticism from that. Obviously, the Conservatives have faced criticism, given him criticism, but not just the Conservatives. He's had wide-ranging criticism for that.
Now, the thing that I don't like about this is, yes, I understand the Conservatives have to criticize the Prime Minister at anything, but the fact that they have problems with the words he used. He said the Prime Minister says that weakness stems from long-time close trade ties with the U.S., was mocked by the Conservatives Monday, and met with skepticism by Eastern premiers. But they want him to not use that kind of language. They don't want to irritate Donald Trump by the kind of language that he's using. That's the basis of this. In other words, the Conservatives are the ones that are wimping out here. They want him to use couched language and not provoke and poke the bear. Yeah. I know I like Carney's approach. It is plain and simple and direct and true. We cannot rely on the United States anymore. That has been very evident. We have painted ourselves into a corner, which we shouldn't have. It's not the United States' fault. It's our fault, right? Yeah. We painted ourselves into the corner, and we did not pay our bill for NATO either. So all these things we did, now it's up to us to get out of it. And he's pointing out plain facts. We cannot count on the United States the way we have before. Yeah. He's not saying that we won't be trading with him. He's still going to be our largest trading partner. There's still all these other things, right? He's just saying that we have to be very cognizant of the fact that the U.S. we can't lean on them anymore. We cannot depend on just having trade. We have to have trade with interprovincial trade. We have to find trade outside our own country. So when they, and anyway, this is pretty much what they said. For the PEI premier, I don't like the choice of words, right? He says Lance suggested that having met and knowing the views of the American ambassador, Peter Hoekstra, if you asked him, he would say, that's not helpful. In other words, he wants to supplicate himself. Remember, bowing down to Trump doesn't work. Look what happened to Europe.
Yeah. Okay. Look what happens with Mike. Mike is saying long-standing dependence upon the USA is a fact. It's not Carney's fault. It's a fact, right? PC or the US bootlick party always have been.
Well, I don't know about that completely.
I don't know about that. I don't think I support that particular part of what he's saying, but the first part, I think Mike is right.
Yes. Like I haven't explored enough the Conservatives' ties to the U.S. I could see them tying in with the Republicans and stuff like that for idealistic purposes, but even they're shying away from this Trump cult thing that's going on in the Republican Party now. But Lance suggested that there is a risk in irritating the U.S. President Donald Trump when probably the most important thing facing the country right now. Yeah, well, look, everyone that tries to appease Trump, what happens? And I think this is the point that they're missing here. Anyone who has gone around and tried to appease Trump gets hit even harder. When the Japanese tried to appease him and he wanted $3 billion investment from Japan, and the Japanese came to solidify the deal, he turned around and said, I changed my mind. I want 3.5% now, or 3.5 billion. Just like that. They had made a deal. They had solid a deal. As soon as the Japanese went with it, Well, the Japanese turned around and went back home on that one, so they had to renegotiate. They weren't going to accept that, but that's what he does. He did that with the aid that they were giving Zambia. They came down hardball on them too, and they walked away from the deal. They said, "Okay, we'll go to China instead," and they lost that one. So anytime you come down hard, if you appease Donald Trump and his negotiators, if you give in, they hit you again for more. It's like shaking you down for your lunch money. I want $1. Right? You give me that $1 of your lunch money, and you give them $1. Well, you got $1. Well, give me $1.50. If you give them $1.50, give me $2.
Yeah,
give me $2 and give me your sandwich to boot. You know, that's how he operates. Yeah. So I think Trump, I think Carney, standing up and speaking fact, speaking truth to power, it might be more successful than the Europeans did to try to bow down and appease him.
Well, basically, Mike asked the question, who started the trade war?
Yes.
So it wasn't Canada, was it?
Well, it was that master negotiator, Dr. Donald J. for Jesus Trump, the master negotiator who could come up with these deals that turned out to be illegal because the tariffs were illegal. And his trade minister knew they were illegal, and that's how he made lots of money buying the tariffs.
Yeah,
the tariff checks.
The big question in the end, though, is going to be that Carney's going to have to face in this, and I'm trying to take this on an either way basis. Do we get to have a stronger trading position with Washington? Are we willing trade partners with people like the European Union? Are we willing trade partners with groups like BRICS? Are we willing to go talk to Australia? If we're going to reduce our dependence upon those US markets, all those sort of things are going to happen. When I say BRICS, of course, I make the thing that we don't use the R and we don't use the C in BRICS, right? We avoid those two nations like the plague. What export opportunities do exist elsewhere? And I think there's opportunities everywhere. We look at the oil market, and that's entirely different. Liquid natural gas market, entirely feasible. But you don't develop those markets in a day, right? You've actually got to start exploiting the LNG before we can export it.
As we can see by what's happened now, that there's going to be huge demand for Canadian oil.
Yeah,
where they bought it from, the Persian Gulf, that's always going to be a potential problem. So as much oil as Canada can get out in the market now, particularly in the West Coast, over to South Korea and Japan, and those, they be thirsty people for Canadian oil. That is for sure. Thailand, Vietnam, anyone that can get Canadian oil because it's safe and reliable.
Yeah.
But to get back to what, like, the premiers are very upset that they want to back off, and unfortunately they want to be obsequious. They want to be a little bit sort of bend over and yes sir kind of approach with Trump, and I don't think that's the right way to go. They want to say we could call it our that having a trade our trade with U.S. is a vulnerability rather than the cold fact that we need to do something else. And then they point out that the Trump era will be gone, so we don't want to offend the Americans too much and all that. Yeah. But I think I think a firm stance is you got to show that, if you're going to get into a fight, you might clobber me, but I'm going to give you a bloody nose. And if you want to do that, and of course Trump is losing popularity at all times. So the Canadian position of waiting a little bit longer and exercising our resolve and making it known that this will work against the Trump regime, or at least hope will, because Trump is becoming more and more unpopular. His policies are becoming more and more weird, and not even the cult of Trump will be able to last it out. So thinks the Canadian negotiators.
Okay, I'm going to put this question to you. Saying that Canada must decouple from the U.S. dependence sounds strong, but it also inverts the obvious question, in my mind at least, of how exactly do we do that?
We don't decouple from the U.S. We have to trade with the U.S. And all the different states in the U.S. want to trade with us. What Ontario itself, I think, what is it, 17 states that Ontario, the province of Ontario, is the number one trade partner.
Yep.
And given the fact that
that's
Canada buys way more stuff from the U.S. except for oil, which makes that important.
The whole point is that we can deal with trade relations with other nations like the European Union, UK, Australia, Mexico, but at the end of the day, we still will have a strong dependence upon codependence, not dependence, codependence with the US and with certain states in the US, right?
Yeah. Can you imagine the potash that comes from Saskatchewan going to all the prairie states? You know how essential that is. What about the uranium that comes out of Saskatchewan? You know what I mean? What about the nickel and the aluminum that comes out of Canada? That's very, very important for the United States. But in the meantime, we buy more of their manufactured goods. If you take the oil out of the equation, we are way behind in the trade between the United States and Canada. As a matter of fact, them importing Canadian oil allows them to sell their own oil at a higher price. So it's, as we pointed out. But the fact is, you can't look like you're bowing down, you know what I mean, and being obsequious. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. 3 bags full, sir. That kind of thing doesn't work, as we've seen that the Trump administration, the more you give in, the more they want.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Anything else really to add for this one?
No, I think that being truthful like Carney is, and being like terse and to the point, not holding back, but not really going on the assault. He is just standing his ground. He's not fighting. He's standing his ground. And I don't think these people who criticize it understand that. They want him to bow down and be more obsequious and use softer language and try to, weasel around. I don't think that's the way to go at all. And particularly, we will have the advantage because Congress, which is Republican dominated, had a vote and insisted that CUSMA between Canada and the United States continues. Canada, United States, and Mexico continues.
Yeah.
They had the symbolic vote in the Senate as well, which is Republican dominated, which insisted that the CUSMA deal, Canada, the US, and Mexico, continue because it was good for America.
Okay. All right. Moving back to the province and provinces in general. So our provinces differ about the use of commercial and charter flights, and basically we know that Quebec has 3 Challenger jets worth a total of $107 million, but they say that Quebec basically say those planes were for medical evacuations, not for the premier. So don't know how you'd be using a private jet for medical evac, but still. And I'm not sure. That's not a daily use. So that would be something I would think you'd charter rather than, than anything else. But how are the premiers dealing with this? Because as I said yesterday, I do understand why you don't want to put the Premier on a commercial flight.
Well, it turns out that going back to the Quebec one, they had the private planes and they used them mostly for medical. Well, you can understand that. Look at the size of Quebec. Quebec is enormous, and it has isolated communities all over this enormous province. It's the largest province in Canada. And you could see that if they wanted to evacuate people or get people as an emergency or a fire or anything else, they could use these jets, right? They don't use them for political purposes. The Premier himself uses, that kind of thing. It just, I don't know. The Premier is lying, basically. The premiers of the other provinces go commercial, and they only go private chartered when there's no other way. You can imagine Alberta, right? Saskatchewan, all these premiers sometimes will not be able to find a commercial flight to get on, so they'll charter a place. And a place like Nunavut and places like that, they have to. They're allowed to use a chartered plane, but they have to analyze whether it's really worth it or not. To use that for governmental purposes. Most politicians are given economy seats. Now they might be able to upgrade them with their own money, but they're only provided economy seats, and they're make that very, very plain to their constituents that that's what they're getting. An economy, that's all they're paying for is the economy.
But again, there's a difference between, for example, a politician flying home, somebody who's in Ottawa who flies back to their constituency in British Columbia, that I get, where they get given economy seats for that flight. But for example, what does PEI Premier do when he's on Premiership business? Right? Let's not delve into whether a thing should be Premiership business or not, but what does the Premier do when he's on Premiership business? Right?
Yeah.
A PEI spokesman said that Rob Lance, the Premier, travels exclusively on commercial flights.
Yeah, so Dougie, come on, Doug. Come on, you're supposed to be an astute politician. You went ahead. You couldn't help it. There was a $28.9 million luxury bombardier ready for you and your pals, and you could not resist, could you? It's like that Ferrari that's there, and you just had to buy it. And then when you bought it, there was the regret, the buyer's regret, because everyone says, Doug, why do you need that? Then Doug comes up with a story and say, well, Quebec does it. Everybody else does it. I can do it too.
Yeah.
And then when the CBC starts to investigate, guess what? Nobody, Doug. Nobody has their own private jet. What are you talking about? Yeah, they do. Yeah, Quebec.
Nova Scotia Premier Tim Houston, apparently, according to his spokesman, travels on commercial flights.
They all do.
Yeah,
they all do. Yeah. The only time they go chartered is when there's nothing else available. Yeah. And it is scrutinized very carefully because they know the press is going to find out about it.
Well, the issue about that, of course, is that we know that, for example, there are premier meetings, right? Meetings of all the premiers on a regular basis that happen 2 or 3 times a year. So those things can be planned ahead, and you can get them. You don't need a charter. You can get them on commercial flights. They're planned ahead. The only reason I think a charter would come into play is for an emergency session of something.
Yeah, but there are remote areas all over Canada. Canada's a vast country, and there's remote areas, and you're not going to get a flight. You try to get a flight from Toronto to Winnipeg. You know, it's it's hard. You might have to fly to you might have to fly to Vancouver and then to, you cannot find. You try to get one to Halifax. They all fly there, but they are spaced out. And if you need one, if you're a politician, you're going to go. Let's say you're going up to a remote community up around Pickle Lake or something like that. I mean, how are you going to get a plane up to the Thunder Bay? You might get one to Thunder Bay, but how do you get it after that?
Yeah.
Right. And if you want to get up there in a hurry, that's what you got to do.
Okay, so the one exception to all of these ones is Quebec's transport ministry has told CBC that the premier does fly private, but on chartered flights, and that there is no government plane for the premier's exclusive travel.
Yeah, so come on, Doug. Now, I don't think anyone would begrudge Doug his Bombardier luxury private plane. I mean, it's going to be Ontario property long after he's gone.
Yeah.
But do you need it? Make a business case for it. Make a business case. Say, this is how much our ministers will have to pay for flights. The taxpayer will have to pick up this tab. But if we buy this one for $28.9 million or whatever it is, and call it $30 million. Say we buy this Bombardier for $30 million. It projects that in the long run, it will save the taxpayer X amount of money, extrapolated, make a business case for it.
And again, Scott Moe, Saskatchewan Premier, according to the spokesperson, said that they use charter flights infrequently, but this occurs when no other viable option is available.
Yeah, that's what I've just said. You know, there's a vast Saskatchewan is a vast province.
Well,
and how even he can't even get from Regina to any like Red Deer or not Red Deer. What would be another Medicine Hat or something like that, or Moose Jaw? How is he going to get from there? You know, he'd probably have to get into a small little plane. You know, and how is he going to do that?
For example, Saskatoon short haul flights between Saskatoon and Regina don't exist commercially.
Yeah, so you know, it's common sense. It's common sense, and it's scrutinized.
In that situation, a Regina businessman who needs to fly to Saskatoon is also going to be on the same charter flight, right?
Well, if Dougie wants his plane, maybe he can make it available to the opposition as well. If it's going to be a government plane, the opposition may need that plane for important things as well. You know, so maybe you could make that case. But seriously, Doug is supposed to be an astute politician. He went ahead and bought this thing without thinking it through. And then he tried to excuse it by exaggerating what other premiers do.
Yeah.
And that blew up in his face. What's happening to Doug? Where is your tactful or sort of dodge and weave political sense? You just stepped in it and then stepped in it by buying it and then stepped into it by lying about why you wanted to buy it.
Yeah, yeah. Absolutely, and that's problematic. But anyway, let's move on. So Carney is about to reboot the new Canada-US Trade Advisory Council. That's what the CBC is reporting.
Yeah, it's. I think that he thinks he has a good eye for talent in negotiations and economic advice. I think what he's trying to do here is limit the ideological people who are over ideological and those who have practical ideas. I think what he's trying to do is build a team of advisors that is both politically astute and will serve him well. I don't think he's looking for tokens. like token from this province or a token from that province or a token from this area or that area. I think he's looking for sound advice and a kind of a panel that could help him out. He seems to have this practical drive that he looks for,
and he's
looking solutions.
Yeah, and he's looking to replace the panel that was previously set up by Justin Trudeau.
Yes, and you've got to get rid of whatever Trudeau set up.
Yeah,
because he had all kinds of ideological nonsense. He would appoint somebody there just because they were, just because they were a bisexual, right? Well, we got to have one of them on the panel. You know what I mean?
Well, the previous panel apparently includes former premiers, labor leaders, industry stakeholders, and diplomats. Now, I'm not. They're also saying, CBC is also saying it's not yet clear who Carney will be asking to join this council.
I think he'll be the one that picks them based on his needs, not what looks good, and that's unfortunately what Trudeau did. He's against global warming, so I'll put him on the panel.
Well, I think it's obvious that there will be industry stakeholders on it.
Should be, have to be.
Yeah, absolutely, because they're the people most affected by any renegotiation of CUSMA, etc. Because that they need to be on it. Some of the other ones, former premiers, I'm not so sure about, because how former are you talking about? I would say current premiers ought to be included on it. Doug Ford being an obvious choice.
Yes, well, Doug Ford, he should be on there because he represents
one of the
largest province, the most economically very economic. We have power, we have minerals, we have industrial goods, we have agricultural goods, we have everything. So yes, Ontario should be a part of this.
And if not Doug Ford, then the trade and industry minister from Ontario.
Yes, someone from Ontario should be there, and someone who is now Doug. He's pretty good with that. He's defended us. He's defended our. He used to like Trump when Trump first got in years ago, and he quickly learned to dislike him because of Trump's trade policies. So we want to keep that going, and we want to keep Doug Ford irritating Trump by putting advertisements on baseball games. That was.
Yeah. All right. I got to get away quick at 8 o'clock this morning, by the way, Dave.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
all right.
Okay. So, anyway, so the Einstein, okay. I was just going to say that, dealing with Trump, I'd heard a ardent Trump supporter basically spelling out, like he still says he likes Trump and a lot of the stuff he's done. So this gives you an idea of the American mind going forward. And the guy says that he feels betrayed by Trump on, even though he likes the fact that the borders are closed and some of the things he's done, but he feels betrayed by the Epstein files cover-up for rich people, the war that he promised not to get into, and selling out American interest to Israel was the third one. And the fourth one was data collection, privacy violations through his buddies at Palantir. So I thought, well, that would be interesting to our viewers to find out where MAGA is now.
Who was saying this?
So this is a online influencer.
Oh, okay, all right.
He's generally leans right very quite a bit, and so I thought that from all the other things I've read, him summing it up, why he felt betrayed by Trump And these four things: the Epstein files cover up,
Yeah.
Covering up for his rich buddies, the war, because he's supposed to be the peace president, and the massive amounts of money he's spending on that war, and how he sold out American interest to Israel. That's very interesting. He feels that that's the case, and the data collection privacy violations that Trump's buddies at Palantir have been implicated in. Those are the four things. But the first three, I didn't know much about the fourth one, but I do remember reading something about it some time ago. But the ones that are the most interesting are the first three: Epstein, war, and sold out to Israel.
Okay. You put up this thing this morning about Canada. As Canada stares down economic uncertainty, the Premier is ready with a plan to protect Ontario.
Yes, well, Dougie and his boys now, aircraft aside, Greenbelt aside, there's some real positive things happening in Ontario right now. Of course, they want to state this, but you can go to this Ontario website here that they have that put out here, and it's kind of like a feel good sort of website, where it tells you all the things that are doing. Protect Ontario, it's called. And Canada stares down economic uncertainty, and we're ready with a plan to protect Ontario. So it makes you feel good. It makes you think. It does. It kind of makes you feel good, But
they're providing links here to a number of other articles on their site about securing Ontario's energy future, making Ontario an energy superpower, which are all topics that we've actually talked about in the last little while. Speeding up approvals for mines and things like that, because in fact we've had problems with developing the Ring of Fire.
Well, I'll tell you here, this is the links they give you on this first page. So they start out with that Australia ready with a plan to protect. So Chris, it already gives you this positive feeling, like I said before, and then it gives you 6 links. Building a new nuclear facilities. It goes on about that. Apparently, we're leading the world in that, and I don't doubt that. Speeding up approvals, mining, protecting Ontario jobs with investments and getting more and more kids into trades. You know what I mean? Diversifying our trade, finding more markets for our trade, and find out what we're building near you. Building so you can hit that link and find out what kind of projects Ontario is doing in our area and our plan to protect Ontario. So the one that's probably the most interesting is the building new nuclear facilities, because it goes on to small nuclear reactors, small modular reactors, which is going to be very telling in the future, because these are like you can see the massive reactors, but if you have small ones that are transportable and you can go here and there with them, and they're easier to build, easier to contain, easier to dispose of, and the whole thing. And you can take small nuclear reactors and just use them for heat in buildings or heating. You can use a small nuclear reactor up in isolated communities where they don't have to use diesel generators.
Well, and the good thing about some of these is that whilst the modular nature of them, I'm not saying you're not going to slot them together in 35 minutes. It might take a month to slot them all back into place, but you can transport them from site A to site B, set up the new, reset them, and now just run power cables into that modular generator.
Yeah, you could switch out modular to modular. You know what I mean? You could have so the whole thing is leading edge, basically. Not too many countries are doing that right now, and that's going to be the future in the short term anyway, because in order to reduce our dependency on fossil fuels, we're going to have to go somewhere else, to do these things, and to make sure that delivering tanker loads of diesel to remote communities up in in the Northwest Territories or something like that, when you could just take a modular reactor and then you have enough power for many years.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and that modular, and the whole point about that modular power station is that if something is faulty, you take the module out and replace the entire module.
Yep.
Right. So then you can investigate what was wrong in that module independently than having to, it makes the whole thing a lot more easily maintained, a lot more easy to actually just up and move the whole thing.
Yes. Anyways, you got to get going, so I'll just say this here. Do not forget Gaza. Again, I'll bring it up, and I will mention the fact that the new Hungarian prime minister or president, I don't know if he's president or prime minister, I think he's prime minister, will not allow Netanyahu to land in his country, even though he's an ultra conservative. He will not allow Netanyahu to come into his country, and if he does, if Netanyahu lands in Hungary, he's going to be immediately arrested. So Netanyahu and his IDF goons and his Zionist goons and his settler goons are really painting themselves into a corner. The jig is up on them. And if we keep that up, maybe they'll start acting like a real civilized nation and start ripping down churches and smashing the heads of Jesus with sledgehammers and making a latrine out of a church. That's what's happening, or spitting on desecrating Christian or Muslim burials.
Yeah. All of which is you don't do that kind of thing.
No, and unfortunately fortunately for us, but unfortunately for Netanyahu, so many people have cameras these days, and these things cannot be papered over anymore.
No, they can't.
And I will tell you that Gaza is a terrible place, and there should be every effort to get the children, especially the children, get them fed, get them back to school, get them some kind of a normality. They've been running, going, moving back and forth all across the country. Yep. These little kids, they've been malnutritioned at certain times. They've been scared. Bombs have been going off. They've witnessed terrible things. There's a whole generation of children there that we have to do something for them, and Israel's not interested.
Yeah,
they don't care if they die or where they go. Anyway, without further ado, not all Israelis, I'll put that there. There are many people that have a human heart there, but they're caught up in their weirdness. I don't know. Without further ado, I bid you adieu. Pray for peace.
Have a good day.